or maybe you can do that. Yeah, please.
I mentioned I currently work for Chemonics International, which is a USAID contractor, and my main role is as project manager. However, I also volunteer, and during the weekend and on my off time, I support the She Is Foundation, an NGO based in Colombia that helps support women affected by armed conflict to enable them to become more economically empowered. We work with all sorts of women in the country, women who have been displaced, marginalized groups, women who have been affected by violence, as well as indigenous groups. And today I'll be talking to you about what it means to engage specifically with women, rural women, and indigenous women in Colombia. Because the way that we've approached them and how we've engaged them is very different than, say, our displaced women. So I'm sharing a little bit about the differences there, and telling you about our model, the She Is model. So the She Is Foundation was born when a friend of mine actually won seed funding from the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C., and she basically decided to start up this NGO in Colombia. She legally constituted the NGO with what we call a 360 model, a model where, as you know, most government-run programs to help women or marginalized groups are very what we call assistential, or this model that basically helps people or gives them money, but the idea that you give someone, right, the fish rather than teaching them how to fish. And so we were finding that a lot of government programs in Colombia weren't necessarily sustainable. They would get to one point of potentially giving rural women some loan, like micro loans, and then it would stop at the money, and then there would be no sort of capacity building for them to continue the work that they were doing with their artisan work. So as a means of bridging that gap, we created the She Is Foundation, and our 360 model basically entails this process. So first, we identify a woman or a group of women on the ground. How we do that? We do that by engaging with local municipal governments. We first make initial contact with our own contacts and say, look, we want to work with this population. Can you give us some names of women that could potentially be a point of contact or a woman leader in their community? And that allows us to enter a community or make initial contact. Once we do that, we take, there's a lot of time there that takes for us to present ourselves so that they know we're comfortable with who we are. And then we enter the community along with the woman leader who allows us to enter her space, because obviously if you just go and show up, people are going to question you why. But if you are there with a woman leader who is presenting you to the community, people are more receptive to answering questions from you and things like that. So we do an initial assessment, a needs assessment, which allows us to understand the profile of the women that we're working with. So by working with them, we understand how many kids they have, what their socioeconomic status is in their group, what their entrepreneurship is. And by mean that is a lot of the Native Indigenous women that we work with in the rural areas have some sort of they do artisan work or as their main form of subsistence. So we identify what that product or work is, and then we basically allow ourselves to do a deep analysis of what their needs are, both as a woman and as an entrepreneur. And once we do that, we go back to the drawing board. So at the drawing board, we analyze what they need in terms of capacity building, and go back a second time to provide that capacity building for them. The She Is Foundation focuses on what we call peace entrepreneurship. And what does that mean? It's allowing women to recognize that if they were, for example, a part of the conflict in the past, right, they were victims, that they can use their skills and their artisan work as a form of recognizing their past and moving towards the future. So we do a lot of what's called historic memory workshops. So that's one of the first things that we provide women. And we also pair it with another workshop focused on an area that they're working on. So an example, Peace Entrepreneurship would focus on, Peace Entrepreneurship, and specifically historic memory workshops focus on bringing communities together who have been affected. So indigenous and marginalized groups in Colombia tend to be a group that have seen the effects of potentially having their land taken away, and so they have lived through the conflict. So we bring them together collectively in a space where they are comfortable, and allow them the space to share their stories about what happened in the past. And this is a means of bridging and bringing them together to build social fabric again, because most women who have witnessed the ravages of war are not necessarily open to sharing their experiences, especially with someone outside. Nevertheless, if you bring them outside, right? And so by doing that, we actually engage them in a process of recounting their stories, telling their companions, people in their community, about what happened, and it helps them reconcile what happened. It allows them to kind of have a full circle ending to what their story actually was. And we pair that with what's called Peace Entrepreneurship, where at the same time that we allow them to recognize their past, we allow them to recognize their strengths, right? And how they are as women in their community, who they are. And then they start actually seeing that, like, yes, like, I am a woman, I'm powerful, but I also have this story, but I don't want that story to, like, drag me down. I want that story to, like, propel me to do better things. And so along the way, they realize, I have this skill to make, products for my country, and they are symbolic of who I am, but also what I lived through. So an example, we have one indigenous woman named Carolina, and she is from Magdalena, which is the northern coast of Colombia. And she's an indigenous woman, and when she was younger, when she was about 15, her parents both they were, like, murdered in front of her eyes. But her mother had actually taught her to make artisan jellies, just made jellies. So when we met her, we learned about her story. We put her through the process of the reconciliation work that we do, which is a historic memory workshop, and she told us her story. It's very hard to hear these stories, especially when you're doing this type of work, but we bring in, for example, a psychologist who helps us really tend to their needs in that specific space. And once she had undergone that process, we actually put her in contact with a university that provided her the installations for her to perfect her jelly making. And now she is helping other women make jellies, right? And we as a foundation use her product and actually connect her to a local market. So now she's selling her products at local, like, dairy markets in Colombia. So that's the potential that our organization sees in enabling women to see their work, and actually enabling them and potentializing their entrepreneurship to allow them to be more economically sustainable. So now this woman is not only herself an entrepreneur, she's teaching others to be entrepreneurs, and that's the aim. And so they start recognizing that their product is not just a symbol of themselves, but also a symbol of, as victims of the conflict, it represents something. So we sell that story as well. In the northern tip of Colombia, we work with a native indigenous group called the Waju. They're a native indigenous population, highly marginalized. They live in the northern tip of Colombia is a very dry, deserty area. There's really no water there. People die of malnutrition. And the women there live on making these purses that are hand crocheted. It takes them about a week to make. And so when we entered that community, as I mentioned, we first identified one woman leader who allowed us to come to her community. We stayed there for about 2 weeks with her family, learning about her. We ate goat. There was, like, we saw the goat being killed. It was impressive. Like, we actually lived their way because we want to understand what's happening, what the actual issues are. And then we learned that they actually come together to knit, to crochet these purses. The man makes the belt and the woman makes the actual purse. They pull them together and they sell them in their local market for about $15. And let me tell you, that's a week's worth of work. But that product can be sold at fair trade standards, right? So we essentially put them in contact with other local markets that could provide them the materials for them to make more purses, and then they made purses for the She Is Foundation, and then we actually sold their purses at fair trade standards in Colombian, like, artisan shops that have actually local government approval. And so now their work is being recognized as a traditional artisan work that is native and just very indigenous to Colombia. And so I just give you those two examples as a way of showing you what we do. A lot of the times, so those are just two examples. And so our idea with the She Is Foundation is that we want to be able to create that for several women. So we have different types of women across Colombia, and eventually we want to take it global. It allows us to tailor each of the programs and each of the capacity building workshops to the group. So, in the northern tip of Colombia, they may not necessarily need like the actual physical resources. They may just need the financial capacity tools to be able to know how to save their money. So we try to identify what each group needs before tending to their need. And then I'll leave you with this last thing. I don't want to go over time. One of the biggest challenges in working in rural areas, specifically, is that it's engagement. So as I told you, I think a lot of the rural communities in Colombia have seen a lot of assistantship programs come through, which means the government enters their community, they want to do something, they say they're going to do something, but then they don't end up actually ever doing anything. So these women tend to be very skeptical and also very afraid of being let down. Like, oh, we've seen this before. Like, you're just gonna come here, do this, and then leave. Like, they're very almost like disappointed and disparaged by the fact that like they really don't see any change. And so that is definitely one of the biggest barriers that we face, because they've seen this so much and they've been hit with it so much that they are very reluctant to work with you. And so we try to make them understand that like our work doesn't necessarily end at the capacity building stage. Once they're actually build their skills, we go back to see how they're doing. We go back to tell them like, hey, where are you at now? Where are you in the process of your business? Like, let's take you from there. And that's why our model is what we say 360 model. Because it really allows them to give the support that they need. Because the process of reconciliation and building peace is not just a one-time thing. It's a process that you're constantly reminding them, like, no, yes, you can. Like, this is something in your past, but you're moving forward to something better. And having that, I guess you call it accompaniment, if that makes sense, allows women to feel supported in their process. And so that is our work, and that's what we'd like to, we're promoting in that, and we're hopefully expanding. And so, yeah, I'd love to have any questions, but I'll let other speakers as well go. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any questions, but if you want, Natalia, how many women have you been able to touch till now?
Oh, okay. Wow, there's a lot. I'll give you rough figures from each region. So in Magdalena, Colombia, in the northern tips, very hot zone, we started with a group of 25 displaced women. We are about 90 now. So that to us is a lot, because the capacity building work that we're doing is for each one of them. And so now we have coordinators in place who help us carry out the activities, because we can't physically do it ourselves. I'm actually based in Washington. The founder is based in Colombia. She's the one that travels out there, but now the work got too big. So we hired, we have someone there who's a coordinator who basically kind of helps us implement the different activities we have with them. In the southern part of Colombia, which is where I'm from Pasto, a small city in the south. It's a cold region, it's more indigenous actually. We work in Putumayo. We have about 45 women there, and they're all indigenous women. Specifically, so the northern tip of Colombia was actually colonized by the Peruvian Empire at one point, so we have a lot of people that also speak Quechua. So we have women there. Some are indigenous and some are, out of the 45, we have also just displaced women who have come from other areas. In the Amazon, we work in the Amazon in Leticia, which is the capital of Colombia. The capital city in the Amazon is Leticia. We have just about like 20 indigenous women that come from pretty much the banks of the river. They flow in. Like the last workshop we had there was, someone told me it took me 7 hours to ride by boat to get here. Like, it was impressive. So that's a smaller group, given like, it's harder for people to get there, and the municipal government there I think this is one of the, when I mention our challenges, this is one of the challenges of actually bringing women here, because they are, as they are Native Indigenous, they are very strong women leaders, like very intense personalities to work with, and so convincing them of something can be even more challenging. And so that is, I think those are the three main goals, and then aside from that, we have our She Is Women ambassadors. So if there's someone that actually loves our work and wants to divulge our message, we have people all over Central America, and also Latin America, women that are maybe like you and me, who are highly have a lot of education, who basically want to make the connections for us or establish contact, and that's a huge network. So yeah, that's the thing. All right, thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
And that was a really, really nice detail given by Natalia. That was really her question, and the work you are doing is fabulous. So, what we are doing in Bihar, so this is one of the states of India. It is land of Buddha, land of Mahatma, Mahavir. So we are very proud of it, but there are few challenges. So we are there to work with those challenges. So we started working in Bihar in 2007, and the work started with the farmers. Our Bihar is an agrarian economy, and more than 70% of population is dependent on agriculture, and they live in rural areas. And when we meet them, these are the farmers, right? When we meet them, they are the one who cultivate the crops throughout the year without knowing that the factors on which their crop depends, the weather, the inputs, the pest attack, and ultimately the market prices, what would be the situation of all of these, right? They don't know anything about it. And least they have the resources to actually access the information and services about this. But still they do it everywhere. They face losses, many of them put their life and resources for this, but still they do it. They may lose it once, twice, thrice. So last year it happened with the corn farmers who lost everything. This year it is happening with the tomato farmers who are losing everything, because everybody has got so much of production of tomatoes that nobody is buying it, right? But still they will be doing it. So why I'm saying this, that when we meet them, we really realize that that is the entrepreneurial spirit we have always been talking about, right? That is really needed for this rural entrepreneurship. So there is a huge chunk of people in our rural India who are there, who take risks, who manage the business, manage the venture, right? And they hope for the profit. But what they exactly need is a kind of support which can actually enable to translate all these effort into this profit in a product in a rural enterprise. So if you look at the demographic of India, we have this 1210 million people who are living in India, and more than 70% across they live in rural India. And ironically, the percentage of GDP which comes from this population is mere 23%. Okay? It's very, very low. The gap between the resources in terms of manpower and of course which is everything related to it, and the productivity which should come from this chunk, it's a gap. But it's just not a gap, it's an opportunity as well. Look at our demographic dividend. In India, we are enjoying the highest demographic dividend in the world now. We have the most number of people in the age bracket who are working and less number of dependent people. Now, it used to be the case with the USA, Japan, and China in 1960s, 70s, but that is reducing now. So India is enjoying that status and will continue enjoying that by 2100. We are in 2018, and there is a lot more air, which will be very, very productive for us. Okay? So we need to really leverage that. Why? Because we do have that opportunity, do have this demographic dividend, but still there are 3.5 crore, which was the number recently we have understood about, that the people are looking for jobs. And they are not getting it. They are the skilled people. You can imagine the number of unskilled people who are looking for a job. So there is a huge population which is striving for getting employment. Okay? Now, if we talk about the trends of rural enterprises in India, it has been very, very productive, very, very prosperous in terms of what as an India, as a state in India we need. Because rural enterprises, I'm just taking a data of 1996 and 97. In this 1 year, it alone produced job of 47 lakh. Can you imagine? We are having a discussion on that. Right now we are getting this data from government who's saying that 33 lakh jobs have been created in last year. And that also includes the number which comes from predictions of NSDC, where they have been given training and it is assumed that they will be placed. And also the numbers which include the opening of EPF accounts. So that may not be the actual number of jobs. So this is just 33 lakh from overall sector, but this only has produced 47 lakh employment. Right? And that was in 1996. So today, if we get that on work, this will be really empowering the whole youth, the whole generation with the jobs, with the kind of energy they want. And why also? Because these rural enterprises have been very, very labor intensive. They are very quick yielding. The gestation period of these rural enterprises have always been low. I'm sure when you have started this, you could realize that the small scale enterprises or medium scale enterprises, they flourish in a very short span of time. So being more productive. Okay? So we have experienced, like we are working in Bihar with now more than 28,000 households, and approximately like 18,000 plus are women-led households in which the women are the front runner and they have been part of the programs we are running. So, and we have created 3,600 plus rural enterprises, and they differ in size, structure, modus operandi, their products, services. So there are enterprises which has 4 women. They collectively doing the mushroom cultivation, doing primary processing and selling it to the market with their own brand. And they are making a good profit of 70,000 per year. It's nominal, but yeah, it makes quite a difference in their life. Then there are rural enterprises where 1,200 farmers together, this includes men and women both, and there are exclusive women and men also. But 1,200 farmers who have come together, who have created a company. It's called Farmer Producer Company. I'm not sure if you are aware about this concept, but it's Farmer Producer Company, which is properly a company registered under a Company Act, and it has their own board of directors. And farmers are the directors, farmers are the CEOs. They are the one who do everything, the document, everything. They do it. And they have made a transaction of 44 lakh rupees in last financial year. It may sound like 44 lakh, but this is huge when you talk about empowering them, making their own enterprise. Because they have the spirit, but they haven't done it. Right? There are rural entrepreneurs, they are individually doing enterprises like, may sound very novice, but they have started rural irrigation enterprises. So I'm sure everybody understands this, that irrigation and water has been one of the biggest challenge. Okay? So they have come up with this solution through which they are providing irrigation services to farmers, and they have made enterprises from there. And they are doing good business, they are doing good profit, and everybody is happy because This is what they need in the villages, in the rural India. And of course, there are a lot more examples which comes along with it. Yes, so they are doing well, and there are actually many examples. And what we have been doing, that we have been supporting them. And what we can see that they have been doing really well, the reason being that all of these enterprises has either evolved from the need in the area or through the economy, or otherwise we have identified the need under different programs and we have aligned the skills and resources on the basis of these needs. So that we see that that has been one of the very key factor for success of these enterprises. And the other, as she also mentioned, that we have been supported throughout the journey. It's not that we are just giving the help in just giving them idea or financial support or maybe some training kind of. No, it's not. We are there from starting. We have the incubation centers where we are actually training them, linking them with the resources person, linking with them, the finance people, so that they can really take loans on their own terms. Because their needs are completely different. In our India, we do have these policies which are coming up, right, which supports the entrepreneurship program, and there are several. If you Google a bit, there are several. But what we have been seeing that there is a bit of the gap in the alignment. So one of the policy which supports for the financial, just take an example of Mudra. So it just gives you the financial support. There are other policies and programs which gives you the skill building support. So there is really a gap because as we said, as we have been seeing, a person needs a complete support. Right? And they need that in their own area. In the village, in the panchayat level, in the block level, they don't dare to come to the city. I mean, already it's very scary because there are so many paperwork and everything has to be done that it's really a scary process. So they need that support in their own area and that throughout support. Okay. So I think these are few of the points which, if can be addressed, will be very helpful for us as a country, as an economy to prosper more. And a few things I would just like to add that what else we can really do to make rural entrepreneurship, which is so vital for our economy to grow, is I already talked about the financial support, policy support, that we need to bring this single window system clearance for rural enterprises. We don't have. For enterprises in the urban area we do have, but then again becomes one more window. So if you earlier had to take 10 clearances, today it's 11. So that's not serving the purpose. So if somebody, we are giving this suggestion through something, please, that is really very much required. Establishment of rural incubation centers. I'm not talking about just 1, 10 or 100 or 1,000 people. There are so many people out there who really needs this support and they can really grow up with this concept. So, but they need these incubation center which has to be in the rural area. So that rural incubation center needs to come into the picture. Then, yes, whenever we are talking about this small, that is fine, but when you come to the medium and large, that is required, need to be backed by the raw materials. For this, government again need to come into the picture for making the common production and purchase. Okay? So if you need too much of raw material for your enterprise, suppose if you are a company, ITC, you want to come to Bihar and you want to do something like what, wheat flour. You want to establish a company, rural enterprise for the wheat flour, but you need so much of raw material of the consistent quality with the consistent supply, which is usually not available in our rural India, in our rural states. The consistency is different, the availability is different, quality is different for everything. I'm just taking an example of the farm producers, but in most of the cases, this is the reality. So that needs to be supported by the government again. And yes, we don't have this anywhere in our mind of the youngsters that they want to establish this rural enterprise. And I'm really happy to see Ruchi. She's so young and doing so well, and there are some more out there, but it really needs a lot more people to come in front. That is nowhere in dream. Youth do not dream of setting up of rural enterprise. So put that in their mind through the curriculum, through the course. If you're not talking about it, how you want them to dream? They don't know about it. Right? At the age of 27, they have dreamed about a job of engineering, settling in US, because they have been reading, talking, and seeing all those things throughout their life. So put that in the curriculum, this rural enterprise as a course. And yes, promoting NGOs like us who are doing their effort while we doing little bit into the sector to promote more enterprises, more entrepreneurs, and do well for the state as well as for the country. Thank you so much.
I have a question. You were talking about that company which has been formed by 1,200 farmers.
Yeah.
So what exactly they are doing after forming this company?
Yes, so that's a very interesting question. And
I didn't on it earlier. Was I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Ah, good. My voice is good. So yes, so we have promoted 16 farmer producer companies like that, which has an average membership of 1,000. So the 1,200 one which I gave you, it's one of them, and they primarily operate in pulses and corns. So what they do, I mean, this has been the 4th year of this organization since it got incorporated 4 years back. And what they do, like, they have a list of portfolio of services as well as the activity. So there are 1,200 farmers who have come together, they have built this company, and now they are planning for the production first. What I just spoke about, that the quality consistency and the production consistency is one of the gap, and they are doing it. It might sound really very different that farmers are planning, but yes, they are the planning in terms of what kind of seeds they need to grow, what will be the timing they will be showing that seed in their farm, because at the end of the day they will be harvesting together, then only they will be able to either sell it to a big enterprises like ITC, which they are doing. They are selling it to ITC, they are selling it to Godrej Agrovet, and they have also establishing now a primary what is that called, primary processing company for corn to make animal feed and pulses to make besan and dal out of it. Right? So this is their portfolio. They also provide services in terms of training, for which they have got the linkages. We did support it for the linkages, so they have the linkages with the Krishi Vigyan Kendra, which is the extension agencies. They have the linkages with the input providers. So all, like, there are a list of seed companies, pesticide company, fertilizer company, from which they buy the produces and directly sell to these 1,200 farmers. And there is a lot of benefit of that there is reduction in cost, and most important, that assurance of quality. Right? So this is, I mean, it's a big portfolio which they are operating with the back end linkage and the front end linkage and the processing part. So they are doing it and they are making good profit. This is the first year they have made the profit. For last 2 years they were in the loss, I'm sorry. Yes. Any other question?
No, I guess just for me, one comment that I thought was highly interesting, because I'm trying to see the linkages in the work that we do with rural, people, and I think you highlighted this, that like it's bringing the capacity built into them or the right resources to them, whereas for us it's the same. I think that's so key, and I just found that to be very interesting, because it's one of the most critical things that people actually need in order to feel comfortable doing what they're doing.
Yes.
So yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. Because I think a lot of things have already been covered in both the interesting sessions, talks.
I'll just start with a few facts first. For our country specifically, I don't know about other countries, so I'll just stick to the numbers of our country. More than 60% of people in India live in semi-urban or rural places, and we are essentially an agriculture-based economy. Villages are our backbones. These are very simple facts, right? Do you imagine that if suppose more than 60% of the population starts migrating towards the city, which has essentially been happening throughout, I think, for the last 50-60 years, what is going to happen? Do you think cities like Mumbai or Delhi or Chennai metros, they will be able to accommodate these people? Do you think they are going to create jobs for everybody? Do you think they will be able to, the government, we look at the government all the while. Do you think the government is going to give homes to these people, shelters to these people? I don't think so. So we are actually trying to address a larger issue here. India is a $2.5 trillion economy, and within the next 3 years, we aspire to be a $5 trillion economy. That's the ambition the government and CII has. How are we going to address this ambition? I think most of the cities have already been saturated. There are industries. The government is doing a lot. They have already done a lot. So where will this 2.5 extra trillion dollars will come from? And another thing, how are you going to address those 60% of the population's need? Is it the fact that these people are not skilled? They cannot take care of themselves? When we say we are essentially an agriculture-based economy, have we done enough for these farmers? We are a rural villages-based country. Are we doing enough for the villages? I don't think the answer is yes, for any country for that matter. So for us, as Rekha mentioned, that she's very happy to see that more and more social enterprises are coming up. That's the need of the hour. So essentially what has been happening in India is people have migrated from villages to have a better living standard. Then they go to maybe a semi-urban place or a capital of a city or capital of a state, and then to make the lives of their children better, they have further moved ahead, forgetting everything which was there in their villages. Most probably they sell off their lands. Maybe they had a lot of land as an ancestral property, but then they did not make a use of it. So that's the essential problem which we Indians are facing currently. Now, when I started iMithila 2 years back, we are a social enterprise, and we work with the rural artisans in Bihar only. So when we started it, the whole idea of starting this enterprise was to create as much as job opportunities we could in rural areas, as well as develop the ecosystem around these areas, so that people are more independent, financially independent, and they can write their growth stories themselves. Because government is not the only one responsible for everything. When we are talking about the government, we are talking about limited set of people. It's our responsibility that we educated people, we have good degrees, very well educated. We people have to go back to our villages and then understand the competency of those villages. Each place in India has its own competency or a unique characteristic. You have to make use of that. You have to understand the competency and then try to scale it up. And then also you have to find an aggregator for the go-to-market strategy for those people, because they are good at what they are doing. Maybe an artisan is good at painting, a farmer is good at cultivating. But how are you giving him the opportunity to sell it to the market? Probably he is not the best person to understand the strategy or his go-to-market strategy. There is where the hand-holding needs to be done. They do not want support. People who already know what they are doing, they don't want the support in enhancing their skills further in what they are good at. But what support they need, as Rekha mentioned, we need more rural incubation centers. That's absolutely correct. Because at this point, if you go to some rural person and tell him, okay, let's make an app and put all your products on the app and it will start selling, I don't think we are making sense here. So you need to tell people that, okay, you do what you are good at, and then let the government or any other person who is very much skilled at marketing or maybe a go-to-market strategy, that kind of support has to come from other people. I'll give you an example. Recently we had an event in Class C city of Bihar. Class C city. So that was something which was for the first time happening in Bihar. And we met a lot of startups. We invited a lot of startups. I was amazed to see people living in the US for 15 years, Indians living in the US for 15 years. They came back to Bihar and then they have started their own dairy farms, dairy production, with a production capacity of more than 1 lakh liters per day. That is the kind of entrepreneurship we need in our rural places. Another example I'll give you, there is a famous actor, Indian actor. I met him recently. He's an actor, and one fine day he said, okay, I don't want to continue my career in acting, I want to be a farmer. And to his very surprise, his son asked him, but dad, aren't farmers very poor? So are you going to, do you want to be poor? That's the kind of perception people have, the kids have in their heads, that okay, my father cannot be a farmer because a farmer is always poor. And that's not the fact. We are not giving the correct picture to our next generation or maybe next to next generation. So I think we educated class, at least people who have the know-how, people who have the expertise, have to come together. The corporates, investors, mentors, the government, everybody has to come together if we want to change the picture and if we want to do something to increase the GDP of the country. We talk about increasing the GDP, but unless you provide employment to people, unless you provide shelter to those people, rural people, I don't think our problem is going to get solved. So at the end, I would just say it's our responsibility as well. We cannot say that okay, we are educated, so we'll go to the US or maybe live in a metro and earn a good amount of money and our responsibility is done. I think if we want to make this world a better place for our next generation, because the world is not going to end here, we have to make the lives of our next generation better or the coming generations better. For that, it becomes our responsibility as well to do something for these rural people so that the GDP is of course increased, but then these people, our coming generations, also understand the importance of rural enterprises and they understand why is it important to have everything a collective thing in place so that this world could be a better place to live in. With that, I think I'll just stop here. If you have any comments or questions, feel free, please. People who joined late as well. Yeah, please.
You talk about that aggregator.
Yes.
So I thought you are branding in Mithila Handicraft.
Okay, so that's iMithila. That's
iMithila,
yes.
sorry.
So that's fine. So iMithila is actually, it stands for Innovation in Mithila.
Okay.
So Mithila is a very more than 15,000 years old art form in Bihar. what we felt was if you want something to exist, especially the art forms or the culture or the heritage, it has to have changes according to time. Essentially, I'll just take your question, please. So essentially, earlier, as I was discussing this with you only, these paintings were done on the walls. And if you want to get a painting, probably it will be very cumbersome for you to get the whole wall painted, or maybe it will be very expensive as well. So with time, everything has to change. Coming to your question, so that was the whole idea behind iMithila. Coming to your question that how are we doing it? So as an aggregator, when I say I'm an aggregator, I have the artisans who know their jobs very well. I have manufacturers of raw material from where I procure the material and then get everything manufactured. Then my artisan is doing his job. Now his problem is how will he sell these products to the market, right? My idea was to bridge this gap, and I know very well that ABC could be my go-to-market strategy. So we can sell things online. We can have our own brand retail shops. We can maybe probably export it. So these kind of things, again, we also have our challenges in doing such kind of things because e-commerce is something which is not that easy to understand as it looks, that you just pick up stuff and sell it. No, that doesn't happen. But then e-commerce also, there are lots of things which we could research about and which we could understand. We do not expect the artisan to understand that, to go about it and to understand that. So traditionally, because of this, what has been happening is people go there and the artisans sell their art form at any random price, underpriced. I would say everything is underpriced. Now, just because they do not understand what should be their go-to market and how to sell their products, but they have to make a livelihood out of it. So they sell their products at any random pricing. We people who are a little sane have to come into picture and stop them from doing that. And we have to understand, or we have to formalize our strategies in order to pay these people properly. So that is how we are just trying to be aggregators. Indian government, we are working with the Indian government as well. And in policy formulation also, Rekha, PhD Chamber of Commerce, I have mentioned this thing very clearly that unless you make policies easier for the class B and class C cities, startups or enterprises, you cannot say that everything is rosy.
Sister,
So
your session is beautiful and a lot of good information here. How possible is it to take the team now outside, because there's another session and
Okay,
you're now
I'm sorry.
15
Yeah.
minutes
Yes.
into the other
I get
session.
that. Yeah.
So may we
Sure.
start the next
We'll
session?
just wind it
Please.
up. And thank you so much. Thank you.
God bless. Thank you.